At long last, it's finally over. The Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, and they were won by the Dodgers, won at a very hefty cost. $700 million to sign the Japanese Babe Ruth. We're going to talk about that, what that means for the Cubs right here on the Cubs Baseball Channel. But before we do that, you're worth $700 million over 10 years, and we want to pay you that. Or maybe we just want to give you that in respect as you become part of the Cubs Baseball Channel. And it's easy to do. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Let's talk some Cubs baseball. Hit the bell so you know when we're dropping new content. With Chad Anderson, I'm Mick Gillispie. It's time to talk some Cubs baseball. Don't forget, this Chad is real at Broadcaster Mick on the socials, and we can finally put this whole thing to rest.
Yeah.
At long last, it was not Toronto after all, like John thought yesterday. Morosi had him on a plane, and then it turned out to be one of your favorite show characters. You're a big Shark Tank guy, and it was a guy from Shark Tank that walked off the plane, and then today, Shohei did what I thought he was going to do the entire time. He signed with the Dodgers.
Yeah, they were always the favorite. You know, we got excited because the Cubs became, according to odds makers, a clear-cut number 2 in the betting world. But yeah, it was always the Dodgers. The Dodgers were always the team everybody was worried about. They're like the National League Yankees, Mick. They just now have gotten to the point. They spend the money, they throw it out there. They've got a huge budget. They've got obviously a massive market out in Los Angeles. They've got the stardom and the superstardom possibilities. They got a great brand. They're recognized all over the country. So yeah, I mean, they were always the favorites. It's funny too, because it became like college football's coaching private jet trackers yesterday. And there's rumor, not confirmed, but rumor that what do you call them in the tower up there at an airport, you know, like flight control or something?
Yeah, the control tower, right?
Yeah, apparently those guys, when that private jet landed, said something along the lines of, for all of those who may or may not be on board officially or unofficially, welcome to Toronto. We're glad to have you here. And then it was Hershevek.
You love that shit. Serious. I'm being serious. You do love Shark Tank.
Oh, I do. Oh, I watch it every week. I watched some DVR of it actually this morning. I love Shark Tank. It's great.
Well, it's so funny, and it doesn't surprise me. Now, the number does. $700 million over 10 years. Ohtani coming off of his second Tommy John surgery. The Dodgers now have Mookie Betts. They have him. Freddie Freeman. I mean, you start to look at this lineup, and it's an all-star lineup. And when I started to kind of put all the pieces together, the first thing I said is, why would he have signed with Anaheim in the first place? It's because he sees himself as a Hollywood type guy. Back when he signed, the National League still had the designated hitter. So there wouldn't have been a position for him to hit. He couldn't play both ways. So he was as close to LA as you could be, right? Anaheim. And when this all started, you know, it was like, hey, it was fun being involved in this, thinking that how big of a brand would it be to have him in a Cubs uniform? But then you're thinking like, okay, here's a guy that doesn't talk to the media unless he pitches. He is on every, you know, advertisement in Japan. I mean, he's a huge, you know, kind of entity there. He's thinks of himself, and he really should, as larger than life. He's the face of Major League Baseball. He doesn't even speak English. We don't know. I mean, we don't know how well he does, but it's not his native language. And he's still the face of the game. And I give him a ton of credit. I don't take a shot when I say that. What I'm saying is this guy's like Messi. I mean, that's the only athlete that you can really compare him to. Why, you know, and why move out of LA? You get the great weather. You when you're seen around the world. You know, it's Hollywood, and who knows? Maybe the next thing for him will be being in motion pictures. You know, kind of like LeBron James. I mean, there's just no telling, right?
Yeah. It's really interesting because it makes sense. You know, he was already, like you said, he was already in Southern California. So he really doesn't have to change much. He probably is going to move. I would think you move because Anaheim, especially with that traffic, unless part of the deal with the Dodgers is he gets a chopper and they just drop him in like David Letterman used to do at the Tonight Show. But other than that, I mean, everything's right there. You know, his trainer, his team, you know, if you've got a masseuse, if you've got a chiropractor, if you got a doctor, like all those things, right? Like they're all there and right there available to you. You don't have to change things. You don't have to like acclimate to time zones or weather, like you were saying. Like it just fits. It makes sense. It fits. The Angels didn't make sense. The Dodgers do make sense. And Mick, here's like I'm just looking at the Dodgers upcoming lineup. And you know, I started thinking like, my God, are the Dodgers ever going to lose now that they add Ohtani? But I don't know. You know, I look initial reaction here and just look at what they projected batting order, and it's Betts, Ohtani, Freeman. Now that's as scary as it gets up top.
Mm-hmm.
One
Right.
through three. That's as scary as it gets up top. Let me go through the middle of the order here. Will Smith, Max Muncy, James Outman. Definitely not bad. Some good bats in there. Bottom three: Chris Taylor, Jason Hayward, Gavin Lux. And then I look at the pitching. I'm like, okay, Walker Buehler, Bobby Miller, Ryan, I'm probably messing up his last name, Pepio, Ryan Yarbrough, Emmett Sheehan, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May. Those are the 7 potential starters. Obviously, they'll only do 5, but I just look and I'm like, Ohtani's obviously a huge piece, and he'll take a starter position next year, starting rotation, that is, or in 2025. But while he impacts any lineup, after that top 3, I mean, it's not an automatic for the Dodgers. You know, like I don't sit back and go, "Oh, Jesus Christ, look at that top." Like it's not a top to bottom lineup, is my point. And
you're like saying, we're not that worried about Will Smith. Like he can hit, but
definitely not worried about old 43 Jason Hayward, 4-3 every time. You know.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So,
we've seen Jason Hayward, so I'm with you, man. I mean, but you got some star power at the top of the lineup. It's just a ton of money, though. I honestly think it's just a bad contract. I mean, to pay anyone $700 million, and the guy's coming off of Tommy John surgery, that's a ton. I thought 500 was a lot, but to throw 200 million more in there, I will give the Cubs and the other teams credit for running up this tab so much that I think it's going to really cripple the ability of the Dodgers to do a whole lot outside of these 3 contracts. And they could end up like Anaheim or like the LA Angels of Anaheim or whatever they're called these days, and be so top heavy with great players at the top, but not really have a balanced team after that. And I get it. They've got the big network. They're not the Angels, because, you know, they do have money, but this type of contract right here, he's got a lot of work to do to make this worth even half of it, right? And I mean, how much money do you have to make, Chad, for $700 million to make sense?
Yeah, I don't know what their expected return is. I mean, if you're wanting a 10x return, I don't see how you're going to get $7 billion on an investment. If you're looking for, you know, a 2x return, I mean, it's still a lot of money the more you spend. It's kind of like buying houses, right? Like if you buy a $400,000 house, there's a chance over 10, 15 years, even less, especially like a pandemic, like 5 to 10 years, it could be worth 800,000.
Yeah.
You spend 700 million on a baseball player, it's hard to recoup 1.4 billion. Just like you buy a $2 million house, it's kind of hard for that house to be worth 4 million. You know, there's only so much it can go up. So I don't know, like the return on that's going to be interesting. And we talked about it earlier this week, Mick, in some shows. I said, as a fan, as a Cubs fan, true fan, like don't work for the Cubs. I'm not hired by the Cubs. I don't do this for the Cubs. I'm a fan. And when I look at it, I go, all right, if the Cubs lost to the Dodgers on this deal and the Dodgers get him for 550, I'm going to be annoyed. So I'm going to say, why didn't you just spend the 575 or the 600?
Right.
But I also said, if the Dodgers get him, I hope it's at some stupid number where I go, oh, well, I'm glad the Cubs didn't get in on that. And that was the number, 700 million. I was like, 700 million would be insane. And then that's what it ended up being. And if you look at, so I'm looking at cbssports.com here because I was kind of curious. Like you mentioned it a minute ago. That's a lot of money. What else could you get? So if the Cubs were going to go spend $700 million, Mick, this is based on CBSSports.com's projections of what contracts would be this coming offseason. Listen to the names they could get here, okay? Yamamoto, Bellinger, Matt Chapman. There's an ace, a first baseman, or a center fielder, and a third baseman. Guess what those are? 3 holes the Cubs need to fill.
Right.
You could keep going down the list and keep adding. You could even add Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery to that list, and you would only be a little bit over the 700 million. So think of all those names you could add to the roster for that price. And it's mind-blowing, what you could get. So I'm curious to see how this is going to affect the market over the next few weeks. Nobody is an Ohtani. He is in a league of his own. But still, like, what's that going to do to other players who are out there looking for some big contracts?
Jed Hoyer's never fallen victim to these type of contracts, right? Since he's been GM, and the deal that Theo made for Jason Hayward was one that always haunted the Cubs. But you got to give him credit. He made a deal to get John Lester that turned out pretty good for the Cubs, right? We'll see what Dansby Swanson's contract ends up, but it's still not like this type of deal. And he performed, I thought, fantastically last year, not just at shortstop, at the leadership. Maybe could have hit a little more. I thought he needed some more days off. That's here nor there at this point. But dollars and cents wise, you can do a lot with $700 million. And I think that where the Cubs go now is they got to pivot to top of the line starting pitching. If they want to contend for a World Series championship, they've got to bolster the starting rotation. I think it starts there. Theo Epstein made a point when he first took over the Cubs. He said, you got to have not 5 starters, not 6 starters, not 7 starters, 8 starters to get you through the season because guys get hurt. Think about last year with the Cubs. Marcus Stroman got hurt. Drew Smiley got injured. Justin Steele was banged up. Kyle Hendricks started the season late. So as you go through the season, you want to have like 8 options, right? And having someone at the top of this rotation, to me, is the biggest need that the Cubs have. More than anything on the field, I think pitching's first. Now, second is, does this signal now that the Cubs are going to start focusing in on a deal for Cody Bellinger? Because if he gets outrageous money, I would think that they would say, you know what, we're out of that too. And how close to a contract, like that Ohtani got, would he get?
If Boris is wanting $300 million for Bellinger, which has been floated out there, I love Cody, but Jesus, I'm passing. Like, how do you box in $300 million, right? Like, Cody's what, 27 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, somewhere in there, mid to late 20s, mid-ish 20s. But there's no way you're paying $300 million for the guy, because how do you box that in? I mean, if it's a 7-year deal, you're paying $40 million. Like, you're not paying him 10 years, $300 million. What's Bellinger going to be worth in 10 years? He's not. I love Cody, but he's not going to be worth anything in 10 years. It's kind of like the Ohtani deal too, where it's so backloaded. Like, that's according to sources. I don't know that, but supposedly it's so backloaded because Ohtani wanted everybody to have room to expand to be able to be competitive immediately if you need to go out and sign another player or maybe grab Yamamoto or whatever the case may be. And I saw a couple of comments about, well, if you backload Ohtani's contract, I mean, with the rate of inflation and the way contracts continue to rise in Major League Baseball, then, paying a amount of money for him later may not be that bad because it may be a bargain. I'm like, yeah, but what's he going to be doing when he's 39? I mean, at some point it runs out. Like, I don't know. And another topic for another show. I'd love to get into it deeper, and we can do this another time. But also, at some point, the bubble has to burst in Major League Baseball.
Right.
There's just not enough money and not enough fans. Like, fans, eventually, you can't pay to have a $700 million baseball player, eventually. So that's going to be something to watch down the road, too, with all these backloaded deals and whatnot.
Definitely interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. And now it's time to pivot and start looking at what the next thing that the Cubs are going to do. But I'm glad that this is over and we can move forward. It just felt like Ohtani was holding Major League Baseball's winter meetings hostage. And I think the Toronto thing could have just been them. He was never going to Toronto. You know what? He was never getting on a plane and going to Toronto. He was never going to be a Blue Jay. It just wasn't going to happen. I don't care what anybody tells me. When I saw that story, and you know this, I was like, I just couldn't be. And obviously it wasn't. And I honestly, like, the other thing is John Morosi hasn't posted on Twitter since he apologized for getting the whole thing wrong. I'm sure he's probably feels sick about it right now. And I know a lot of you guys have commented on that as well. I told a story yesterday about me messing one up, and not on this level, but when you try to be the first guy there, anything can happen. Sometimes you get bad information. Sometimes your sources think they know something and then they don't. And that's just the way that it goes. You don't want to get that wrong. I'll tell you something that you don't get wrong, and that's your work with Modern Lending.
No. And, I said this the other day. We've helped enough families over the last 13 years. We could buy Ohtani 4 times over at this point. I mean, we've helped fund over $3 billion in mortgages in the last 13 years, 10,000 families. And guys, that's not because we have some magic wand. I mean, we're honest to God, just real people. And we just talk to you straight and help you out and try to give you the best information for you to make a decision as possible. So we're low pressure people, but we're here to just explain options and help. But if you'd like to reach out, feel free. Info is there on the screen, chadanderson.info. That's my cell phone number as well. 1 out of every 3 people are refinancing right now because this country is in such bad credit card debt. So let's help you get out of, if you're in 700 million of, I can't help the Dodgers. Okay. Like, if the Dodgers called me, I couldn't help them. But if you want to call, I'll be glad to look or help or talk about your situation privately with you. Reach out if you'd like to.
Guys, something else I want to tell you about is the Tennessee Smokies team store, smokiesbaseball.com /team store. All jerseys are 20% off. That goes until Sunday, December 10th. So check it out for yourself. You might have, depending on when you're watching this, a little time to get 20% off all jerseys. And that sale is automatic. You don't need a promo code for that. So check it out. And proud presenter of the Cubs baseball channel right now. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Go Cubs. Talk to you soon.